On today's Newsmakers, communists target a Christian coffee shop, persecution rages, and a major battle over parental rights. That and more coming up. Welcome to Newsmakers, a show where we go behind the headlines every week to bring you interviews with pastors, entertainers, politicians, and other notable figures. On today's Newsmakers, we begin with two parents who are suing a Michigan public school district. Now, they're suing over the claim that district employees began to socially transition their daughter without their consent. They even say that there was an attempt to conceal these efforts. Let's welcome Dan and Jennifer Mead to the show. Dan and Jennifer, appreciate you joining me today. Now, you are involved in a lawsuit against the Rockford Public Schools out in Michigan over pronoun usage surrounding your daughter. Dan, can you tell us a little bit about what happened?
Yeah, while we were working with this school closely to address her academic needs in regards to her autism, it came to our attention that the school was actively deceiving and hiding from us the fact that they were transitioning our daughter from being a girl to a boy, using a boy's name and pronouns. And this came to our attention by paperwork that they had given me, and one of the school employees had inadvertently forgotten to change one of those male names and pronouns.
I imagine at that point, once you found out, you started to dialogue with the school, ask them perhaps not to do what they were doing. What were those conversations like? What happened next?
Well, actually kind of roll that back as we were trying to decide what our next step would be, because we started putting some things together. We're going, I think might be what's going on. How do we want to handle this with the school? Later that same week, Jennifer found in our daughter's backpack a book that had been given to her by the school counselor from the school counselor's personal library that our daughter was kind of hiding from us. And that book contained a story about a homosexual boy and a confused boy, and the homosexual boy trying to kind of coerce the boy into a relationship with him, very explicit. And so when we found that, it was kind of like, all right, we got to pull her immediately. After which then we had a meeting with the school principal thinking, I wonder if he even knows. Does it, how broadly is this going on in the school? And so as we spoke with him, it came to our attention quickly that he said to us, look, you have to understand, this is the school policy. We're mandated to do this. The desires of the children outweigh those of the parents, and there's not a whole lot we can do in that regard.
Yeah, and that brings me back to you, Jennifer, on and feel free to share as much as you're comfortable. I don't want to push people to share too much, but how did this affect your relationship with your daughter as this was going on, even once you discovered it? What are some of the parameters maybe and barriers that were put up because of it?
That's interesting that you asked that, because I was looking back, just trying to wrap my head around everything and seeing if there's anything that we could have missed. I get upset about it. We have always told our children that no matter what, whether we agree or disagree with them, we love them no matter what, and we will always love them. And if anybody in the world, we are there for them. They can trust us. We are here to speak truth to our children. And I look back and I think that relationship sort of changed for a little while. Mm-hmm. I could sense some turmoil in her. And I knew there was something going on. Her anxiety was through the roof. She was depressed most days. She was missing a lot of school. She didn't want to go to school, or I would get a call in the afternoon that she needed me to come pick her up. So I knew that there was something going on, and we were working with the school counselor very closely to come up with a plan for her. I was sharing personal information about what was going on within our family dynamic as well. And I thought that we were being transparent. Mm-hmm. And so now I will tell you, our daughter, she knows who she is. She is no longer confused. She knows that we love her. She knows that she can always come to us for everything. She is thriving. Her grades are up. She is happy. She's like a different child now. And it's wonderful that we've got her back.
You know, that is wonderful. I know this is hard to talk about because it's so personal. And that brings me to you, Dan, on just the decision to sue over this. A lot of people, they find themselves in these positions and they might say, I don't want to deal with the backlash, because I would assume once you go public, a lot of people support and a lot of people have opinions on the other side of it. What has led you, Dan, to say, no, we want to take action here. We want to right this wrong?
Well, when we left that meeting with the principal, all that I could get through the thought that just kept coming back to me was, what if we just go away quietly and don't do anything, don't say anything? How many other parents have done this before us? And that even doesn't matter. How many are going to come after us? And if I ever had to look at another father or mother who went through this and say, oh yeah, that happened to us too, but we didn't do anything about it, I don't know how I could handle that. And so I just said to Jennifer, I've got to figure out a way to make this right and make it so that they don't keep doing this to other children and other parents, whether it's this specific issue, or what really is our problem is that they lied to us, mm-hmm. that they deceived us about what was going on. So it isn't, this issue, a lot of people want to make it about the very particular, oh, your problem is just with the boy names and the boy pronouns, and you're making a big, a mountain out of a molehill. That just happened to be the catalyst that set us off of saying, no, you don't get to lie about anything.
Right.
This is what you chose to lie to us about, but you don't get to lie to the parents about anything. You don't get to withhold information, change documents, none of that stuff.
Well, I want to thank all of you for coming on and talking about this. Again, I know it's difficult to talk about. It's tough to go public, but like you were saying, you want to make sure that you can help others who are facing similar things all over the country right now. We will continue to cover this and have you back as the details unfold.
Thank you so much for having us on.
We'll continue to cover this story as it develops, and up next, we'll meet an owner of a Christian coffee shop who says he's been under fire from communists and LGBTQ protesters. This is Newsmakers on the CBN News Channel. Welcome back to Newsmakers on the CBN News Channel. Our next guest is Jamie Sanchez. He's the founder of the Drip Cafe, and he says his business and ministry have been under constant attacks by communists and LGBTQ protesters. For months, these individuals have apparently assembled outside his shop, reportedly in an attempt to shut it down. Let's welcome Jamie to the show. Jamie, you launched the Drip Cafe, and you were with us a few months back talking about a really crazy situation surrounding the cafe where the Denver communists and other groups, LGBTQ groups and individuals, have been protesting your presence there in the community. But there are groups of people and individuals who do not want you there. And the protests that had started that we talked about back in August when you were on the show, this hasn't stopped. Usually a protest, people kind of tucker out. They stop doing it at some point. They kind of move on. The protests continue. Tell us a little bit about what do the protests look like and what is it that they're so upset about?
Yeah, it is interesting. And I think that's why we can definitely identify that it's a spiritual warfare going on, because by now they should realize they're not affecting us the way that they thought they would. Their goal is very clear. It's on their site. It's on their posters. They want to shut us down by, ruining as much business as possible so that we can't pay rent. That's their goal, right? So
how often do they show up? Sorry to interrupt, but how often are they there protesting?
Yeah, they come once a month now, still, since the day we've opened back in June 2023. They've come. They used to come weekly, and then now they're just coming once a month. And they show up and they protest during the busiest hour on the busiest day of the month, essentially.
And when they show up to protest, how many of them are there? And what does that protest look like? Is it yelling? Is it silent? I mean, just take us through those, elements.
Yeah, the numbers vary. They seem to be getting weaker, it seems, or maybe it's just too cold for them to be outside. I don't know. It's really cold over here in Denver right now, like getting towards the 10-degree area sometimes. So they, could be anywhere from 5, 10. There was 30 at one point. So it just really varies on how many people they can get riled up for that month. They stand outside with a blowhorn and they're screaming. If a customer tries to walk in the door that just is a regular person trying to come in, they will scream in the blowhorn and say, "Don't go in there, don't go in there," and literally scare them from even wanting to come into the cafe, even though they have no idea what's going on. They just scare people, and they're, handing out flyers with a ton of misinformation with my picture on it, accusing me of certain things. They've even actually gone as far as attacking me personally and saying that I'm using my late wife's death as a tool to get people to feel sorry for me. And it's they're getting very personal with it.
What is that? What is, okay. So we have to stop there and address that because you're a widower, right? You've lost your wife.
Yeah.
And what is that like for you as a believer, as a human being, for that sort of thing to be brought into this conversation?
Well, I would have to say I'm a liar if I was to say it didn't hurt at all. I mean, if anybody says anything about that kind of situation, it hurts a little bit. But for me, it's also a confirmation of how powerful my testimony is that Christ has given me through my life, that the enemy would try to pull that out and use it as a tool against me, So the fact that he would pull that out and use it as a tool against, it just confirms to me that part of my testimony is actually one of the things that has made me the strongest and has, made my ministry as strong as it has through Christ, because that's how Christ works, So yeah, I mean, it's crazy, but the other thing is God has sustained me from day one since that has happened, since that tragedy. And I have 2 young daughters, that were here when she passed away. And actually, great things happened in 2023 as well, where I actually just got engaged. So that's, just a new part of the story God is doing. God just doesn't stop. But that's the enemy trying to pluck at, hurts in my life, and he can't win. Jesus already won. So
what would you say, when it comes to your persistence, you stay there, you remain there. A lot of other people might say, you know what, I'm folding up shop here. I know God called me here, but he'll call me somewhere else. I'm moving on. And they might sort of take matters into their own hands rather than, relying on his call. What keeps you saying to yourself and to those you're helping there, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep persisting and staying here regardless of what they say and do?
I just trust God so much. He's done so many things in my life to prove to me that I can trust him. And for me, the cafe is not mine. I don't really see it as my cafe. I don't see it as Recycle God's Love Cafe. I see it as God's cafe. So he gave it to us. If he wants it to go away, then he'll make it go away. But, the door that God opens, no man may shut. So if that door is going to be open to his will, it's going to be open. So I really don't worry about it being shut down, because I just trust that whatever happens, it's always part of his will. And as long as me and the staff and, the volunteers with Recycle God's Love do things with integrity and we're lifting all things up to God, then we don't really have anything to worry about,
Well, I appreciate you taking the time updating us. We'll continue to check in with you as time goes on. Hopefully, some of this continues to temper as we move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
You can find out more about Recycle God's Love and the Drip Cafe at recyclegodslove.com. We'll be back on the other side of the break with a truly disturbing report about global Christian persecution. This is Newsmakers on the CBN News Channel. Welcome back to Newsmakers on the CBN News Channel. For our final segment, we're sitting down with Ryan Brown. He's the president of Open Doors US, and his organization's World Watch List 2024 found that almost 5,000 Christians were killed around the world for their faith, with 365 million Christians facing what he called intense persecution. Let's welcome Ryan to Newsmakers for more on these troubling trends. I wanted to thank you for coming on today to talk about the World Watch List, which is just out. And this list is very sobering. For those who don't know, this is a list that basically ranks the most difficult places in the world to be a Christian, where persecution and discrimination are at their worst. And, let's just start with a general question. Where are we right now, with this current report when it comes to persecution? What does that dynamic look like across the world?
Yeah, we're at record high levels of persecution. The report shows that that number has grown to 365 million individuals that are suffering persecution because of their decision and their faith to follow Christ. At one level, that number in and of itself can be mind-numbing. It is so large. I take a look, and you take a look at just that increase of 5 million people. There are, fewer than 25 of our states here in the United States that have a population in excess of 5 million people. And so that type of an increase just in and of alone, and recognizing each and every one of those 5 million individuals represents a unique story in which, Christ is still relevant and present, but a story in which we have a brother and sister that is experiencing severe persecution because of their faith.
Yeah, I mean, you went through those numbers. I have them in front of me right now, and they're incredibly shocking. I mean, you think to yourself, okay, it was bad enough that 4,500 people were driven out of their home, or their homes were assaulted, in 2020, in the 2023 report. To see that go to 21,000. Why do you think, what is driving that? These are massive. You mentioned historic. These are massive increases in a 1-year time period. Why?
Yeah, great question. Well, you had mentioned where so much of this is taking place in sub-Saharan Africa. And in many cases, this comes alongside general instability in those countries. And because of that, Christians can often be persecuted with impunity, that they are easy targets for those looking to further destabilize governments. Christians become an easy target that they can persecute, that they can enact violence upon without necessarily seeing the repercussions from that violence. And so that the broader instability, the political instability that we see in so many countries in sub-Saharan Africa has really been a fuel for some of this persecution against Christians.
Before we close out, and I want people to go to Open Doors, and I want them to read this report and see it, but one of the things that happens almost every year, there was one year where Afghanistan took the top spot recently, but North Korea always ends up being number one, worst place for persecution. Can you talk a little bit about what is happening there, what we know of, because I know it's very reclusive and difficult to get information, and what made them number one?
Yeah, you're right. The better parts of 20 years, it's been sitting right on top of that list. And, it's an authoritarian regime that sees Christianity as a threat to the state, and therefore looks to stamp it out in any form or fashion in which it's observed. It's amazing to think that just possessing a Bible equates to in essence the equivalent of a death sentence for an individual and their family as well, whether that be through forced internment in prison camps, labor camps, or an actual death sentence. Just the simple possession of a Bible. The cost is great in those areas, let alone looking to come together with fellow believers to worship in community. Truly amazing the threat that they live under. In that context, again, it is so encouraging to see, though, that men and women responding as the hands and feet of Christ, even within the context of that persecution. Open Doors, we're privileged to work with different safe houses or trauma centers outside of North Korea for those that have fled the country, and be able to minister to them spiritually and physically and emotionally. But to see how many of those individuals desire to then go back to that place of persecution, to go back to be the hands and feet of Christ after they've been ministered to. Their desire is for their country.
Where can people go if they want to download a copy or explore the different country reports that you have?
Correct. If you go to opendoorsus.org, you'll see links there for all of these resources.
Well, I appreciate your time. Thanks, as always, for joining us today.
Thank you. Real privilege to be with you today. Thank you.
You can head on over to opendoors.org for the full World Watch list, and we'll be back in just a moment with more Newsmakers. That's all for today's Newsmakers. Thank you for watching, and be sure to head on over to the CBN News YouTube channel for the full interviews that you saw on today's episode. Plus, you can check out our new daily Newsmakers podcast. We feature one full interview every single day. You can subscribe to that podcast on your favorite podcast platforms, and we'll see you again here on the CBN News Channel.